All right, I'm gonna change the way I do my YouTube videos just to kind of streamline things so I can get the content out to you guys faster. So there's gonna be less editing involved, more off the cuff, authentic style kind of videos. So bear with me here. I'm gonna do my best to bring this content to you guys the new way. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about why rent control does not work. So currently right now in Calgary, so I've heard, there's people protesting for rent control. Because as of right now, basically rents have gone up so fast in Calgary, 20-25%, just like they have here. But there, you can literally just bump up the rent if you're a landlord, right? So people have literally gotten notices saying that the rent is going up 20%, 25%, just like that, and you have to start paying it. Otherwise, you just simply get evicted from your home because the laws there favor the landlord, right? So people obviously have a problem with this, and they're protesting right now for rent control. But I would say be very, very cautious with this. And the reason why is, okay, this is how I would explain this, right? Supply and demand has been around since basically humans have been around. Even when humans were first here and we were in like the caveman era and we just started being able to communicate, we would trade amongst each other. Bear pelts, fish, food, whatever. And all of those things operated on supply and demand. Hey, I'm not going to give you a bear pelt for 3 fish because the bear pelt's way harder to get than 3 fish. I'm going to need at least 10 fish for this, right? Like, this is a ridiculous way to explain this, but you understand what I'm saying. Supply and demand has been around forever. And the problem with rent control is you're screwing around with the natural way that things work, right? It's like being all natural and working out and then, being like, I want to gain muscle faster, so you use steroids, right? Which is essentially rent control. You're using steroids, or quantitative easing would be basically a more direct comparison to steroids. But either way, in the short term, it looks like a great idea. And in the short term, it does great things for tenants, right? Because the rent can't be bumped up. They can live there below market rent, so on and so forth, right? But in the long term, what ends up happening is if you're doing steroids, you're going to have problems with your hormones, right? In the short term, it's great. Long term, it's bad. But with rent control, this actually increases the market rates for rent over the long term. And how that happens is, just like the real estate market, there are more homes in the overall market than there was last year. More homes have been built, more homes exist. Yet, new listings and inventory is at like 20-year lows, right? Not adjusted for population. So there's way more homes available, yet there's less homes on the market. And the reason why that is because, well, part of the reason, there's a multitude of reasons, but part of the reason is that interest rates are so much higher than when people bought these homes that they have 5-year loans at 2%, 2.5%. And if they sell and move, then they're going to have to get a mortgage at 5%. So they're staying there for as long as they can, hoping that rates will come down, or I'll just wait out my mortgage term and juice this for as long as I can. Well, that principle, that exact principle, applies to the rental market, right? So there's less supply turning over in the real estate market right now. That's causing less inventory because interest rates have gone high, yet everyone is on older interest rates. And that in turn now is pushing up the prices because we've seen a newfound demand come back into the market, but the supply has just gotten lower and lower and lower, that prices are starting to get pushed up. Well, this exact, phenomena exists in the rental market because of rent control. You have all of these tenants right now paying, like as an example, the market rent for a 1-bed in Vancouver is $2,700 a month, yet the average tenant is paying $1,700 a month. So it's like $1,000 difference there. Or it might be the market rent is $2,600. I think it's a $900 difference. So what happens is tenants that under normal circumstances, if they just had to pay market rent, would move, right? They would be like, you know what, I have a kid or I'm getting married or whatever. I might as well just move and upgrade my space right now because either way I'm gonna have to pay market rent. Well, what ends up happening is when you're paying substantially under market rent, even if you have to move, you're gonna do whatever you can to just tank it out for that terrible word to use, but you're gonna tank it out and suffer for as long as you can to keep that under market rent for as long as possible because you're saving so much money every month instead of just simply moving. And the result of that is that there is less rental supply circulating through the market. exactly what's happening in the real estate market right now. And as a result of this, over the long term, this actually pushes up rental rates a lot higher than they otherwise would be if rental control wasn't in place to begin with, right? Now, if we took away rent control, yes, tenants would suffer in the short term because, we could just landlords would just bump up the rent right away. But eventually when that tenant has to move or their landlord sells, and their landlord will sell because eventually rent will go up so much to the point where their ROI does not make any sense at all. It just makes more sense for them to sell and buy a different investment property with a new tenant. They will eventually sell, and then that tenant will be forced to pay the new market rate, which will be probably much higher than it otherwise would have been, right? So if we didn't have rental control, yes, rent would still go up. Yes, it would suck for tenants in the short term, but over the long term, it would flatten the trajectory of rents, which currently right now is like this. We could at least get it like that over the next decade without rent control, because there would be a lot more supply circulating through the market every single month, every single year, every single week, because tenants would be moving more often because they wouldn't have these under market rates, right? So anytime the government intervenes with these laws and you mess around with just the natural way the economy has to work, the economy isn't a planned thing. It's based on supply and demand, which is just naturally how things work. So when you go and mess around with a natural ecosystem, you're gonna have other issues that surface down the road. You're basically just going to kick the problem further down the road for people 10 years down the road instead of right now. It's exactly the same thing as doing steroids. You're benefiting right now in a massive way, but later on you're going to have all these new issues that start surfacing. So in the short term, rent control is good for tenants, but in the long term, it ends up being much worse for tenants. And we're seeing the result of that right now in Vancouver. There's nothing to rent. It's extremely difficult for tenants to rent something, and rents have just completely skyrocketed. And I get that, rents are going up super quick in Calgary too, and they don't have rent control. But that's also because of how unaffordable it is to live in BC and Ontario, that there's so much interprovincial migration into Alberta. So because these two areas have become so unaffordable to live, everyone's migrating into Alberta, right? So my opinion, rent control sucks, and we shouldn't mess around with the way that the economy is just naturally supposed to operate. Regulation has pretty much never fixed the problem. If you just go and look at all these taxes the government has added to the real estate market and all these things they've done, except for maybe the stress test, it's always just made the situation worse somehow. So that's my opinion on rent control. Subscribe, like, I'm that Agent Kelly, and if you want to chat, you can do so by scrolling down, clicking the link in my description, and booking yourself into my calendar for a time to chat that's convenient for you. And if you do enjoy these more raw kind of videos with no editing at all, please do let me know in the description. And I'm making moves to move you. Peace.